was your date of birth, Joe?
April 29, 1920, in Jamestown.
So you went through the school system here in Jamestown?
Yeah, and I, unfortunately, being I was the only one after unmarried, I opted to go to work before I graduated, which Miss Frank said, Joseph, you can do all that work when you get out of here.
Yeah.
We need you in school to learn. So at the 11th grade, I went to a CCC camp.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Very distinctly, yes I do. Oh, the infamy of the Japanese who obliterated the fleet in the Pacific. Yeah, that was a surprise attack. Yes, sir. Well, anyway, we got even with them, didn't we? I went to Fort Niagara, where I was installed. From there, Fort Dix, and then from Fort Dix to Camp Swift, which was located in the Austin, Texas area. And from there I went to Fort Leonard Wood, and then to Taunton, Mass. And from Taunton, Mass, I went out of Boston and landed in Southampton, England. I was assigned to the 30th Infantry, which I was so proud of, you know. We did a good job in Europe. We had a very good artist, and we had, unfortunately, a man that was in the Army and we made fun of him. And while we were in Germany, we put one of those big hats on him and dressed him up, and we had some fun with him. And one day he portrayed him in some, evil way, and it was in a barn. We were having a good time, and he painted him in this position, of course. And suddenly there was a rumor that the captain was going to, check our quarters. So we put blankets over. So he says, "What's this? Your work, Cascone?" He unveiled it, and there was he said that was a good job, but nonetheless it was not good for this man here. But anyway, those are things that caricatures we had with him, and at times we had fun. I remember when we were in this beautiful home that the Schutzstaffen SS troops were. We were really besieged with an attack in which they were on us, and we had to. The only way to do it is to call a barrage of artillery in our unit, and of course it was ours killed as well as them. But we had, it was so beautiful that we held church in it. There was a grand piano, and we all sang and so forth. And one day I asked for a chicken for the lady who owned the home, and she said, "No." I says, "Hey, I want chicken." She said, "Well, I said, "Look, how many chickens did your man steal from the French?" I said, "I want one of your chickens, okay?" And she said, well, she didn't like it, but I did take it. We went back, doubled back to Southampton, and we got a coastal town. I think it was Avranches, France, okay? And there was very little German, we had very little land they had taken at that point. And so we fought hard until we got St. Lo. It was bushes that were high, okay? And we'd throw a thing over there and they'd throw it back or vice versa. And until July 15th, 1944, Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, in this attack, the airplanes flew into our lines, but unfortunately, there was a terrible wind, and it went into our lines, and our men, we dug them out of holes and stuff like that. And Lieutenant General Leslie McNair was killed that day, July 15, 1944. And of course, we broke through the hedgerow country, they call it.
Right.
And then it was, sometimes we went as high as 90 miles. There was nothing, you know what I mean? And we finally got into an area where we had to fight again. It was a stalemate, and I seen this man laying up against the barn, and I said, yeah. So I went up to him, and I said, what's wrong with this man? I opened up a can of, sea rations and fed him. In the meantime, my division had me AWOL.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I naturally made that clear that I was taking care of a soldier. So it's okay. We skirted up into the Brunswick and Kiel in the northern area, and then we came down again. But we landed in a place called Speckholzerheid in Holland. December 18th, and we were planning a Christmas party. But the Germans didn't think so. So they broke through at Aachen. We were called on the 18th of December to get back into the fray. We landed at St. Vith, which is close to the Battle of the Bulge, that the German was told, nuts to you, because they wanted us to, we were encircled,
Right. General McAuliffe.
Yeah, and he says, what is los nusa? Nuts. What was interesting, Greg, we were at one time encircled in Mortagne, France.
It fell to the 30th to stop Hitler's blistering counterattack just weeks after D-Day, here in the small town of Mortagne, France.
I don't think they ever done it before, but to supply us, they had, I guess, artillery shells that were loaded with food, and they, put it in the Mortagne for us to eat.
Wow.
Now that was something. I mean, I never dreamed that would be, coming out of the sky, but it did. Even if it was sea rations, we loved it. I'll tell you what I think was the most intelligent thing that happened. If I knew the commander's name, I would state it. We were practicing the Roar River crossing. Mm-hmm. It was at night. We were night fighters, okay? Mm-hmm. And the bed check Charlie, we called them, because we didn't have the P-38 to intercept them, you know what I mean? And they used to come at 10 o'clock and then harass us with bombs and stuff like that.
Every few evenings, the Germans sent over a Ju-88 to check on us to see what we were doing. We called it Bed Check Charlie. They flew around, dropped a flare now and again, but as long as they didn't drop any bombs, we didn't bother them, and they didn't bother us.
We found out that if you light a cigarette on the ground in that area, they would detect somebody lit a cigarette. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
So we were told, when they come, don't you have a cigarette or light any, Okay. So what happened this night when we were crossing, or going to go crossing the Roy River, they came over. And this lieutenant was very intelligent. He said, whatever you do, pass it on. Don't look up and sit still. Don't move a muscle, because it looks like a bunch of bushes. You know what I mean? Because we were lined up, and everybody was told, don't move and don't look up, because you look up, you see, believe it or not, they threw flares and so on. But by our doing what he asked, we saved our lives. Lieutenant Searcy come up to me one day. He said, Joe, you had the best hearing, evidently. You can make the difference between the dot and the dash, so I'm going to put you in radio school. So I learned how to use the SCR 284 and the SCR 300, which is on your back. I got a Bronze Star one night. Well, what happened? Sergeant Sparky that morning, it was like everything. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, Spark, those motors are not ours. Oh, Joe, what are you talking about? I said, hey, I know the difference between the motor, had good ears. I know the sounds of our motors, tank-wise, and, whatever they had, they were coming. And consequently, in the aerial photographs, there was what we called zigzag. We named it zigzag. They were trenches. It's normal for a soldier to always look for some place to go to not get hit, And I said, okay, with a radio on my back, I rolled. I didn't give a crap about my radio, nothing. I rolled, and I got as close to the center of these 4 companies. Well, 3 really, because the 4th was a heavy weapon. The 3 A, B, and C are infantry. See, we used to, as a radio section, we used to place the companies in areas that were supposed to be fought from an initial point to a point that was where we got our particular, area. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I said, whatever you do, if you get in zigzag or in the trenches, don't go to the building at the end, because that's what everybody, Germans know. You're always looking for cover. And I seen one guy from one of the companies got up with a bazooka and shot into the tread. And he didn't stop it, but he injured it enough so it took off. But in the meantime, they threw flares 3 times. And I said, hit, the boy says, I'm hit. I said, shut up. Shut up. We'll take care of you later. Come on. So I tell you, and one bullet hit a rock right near my head. And zing! I said, oh my God. And I thought I could put my head in a hole, but I figured, well, this is it. But anyway, we survived. And they didn't get into that building. But what happened? They thought that the American soldier was in that building, and boom, So anyway, consequently, I got, Lieutenant Mosley says, Joe, in Needers there, what happened prior to this attack, Lieutenant Lloyd was killed. Somebody had a bazooka on their side and tripped it, okay? And in so doing it, Lieutenant Lloyd was killed. The radio operator was hurt. So Lieutenant Mosley from C Company, I was in battalion, he said, I want a radio operator. So Major McCullough says, Joe, you go to Company C and you take over. My sergeant said, no, this man has a family. Take me. I said, don't worry, Duff. I said, I'll be fine. Okay. So anyway, after this attack, I think it was a lieutenant, he says, I'm going to Chicago, Joe. When I come back, if you want to be my company, I said, no, I have a deep seat of love for the men I work with. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, get yourself another operator, okay? So anyway, he suggested the Bronze Star. Now, how I got the Silver Star that I'm supposed to be getting in Washington. When we were in Huntington, there was an attack and they didn't have any radio, okay? So Major McCullough and I, in a half-track, we went across the land and we went into Huntington, and lo and behold, there was a SCR 284 next to the window of the cellar on the sidewalk.
Oh my gosh.
I said, what the hell is that doing on the sidewalk? So I picked it up and brought it in, and I see there was a dead man who was an observer, I found out later, was in the court, and during an artillery barrage, he got him in the throat. And he was laying at the top of the stairs, and the blood was oozing down. And for some reason, they were spellbound. They didn't want to move from the basement, the cellar. The radio was out there, and I figured, what the hell? So right away, I picked it up and called battalion because they wanted to know what weather was on.
Razor 6 Able, this is Fox 4-6, over. This is Razor 6 Able, over. 6 Able, we have 4 or 5 dip tanks in our rear supply area. Can't get through them. Can you get some tanks up here, over? Roger, Fox 4-6, dispatching our tear dog with a bazooka team. Out. Break. Tear dog 1-6, this is Razor 6 Able. Did you monitor Fox 4-6, over? Razor 6 Able, this is Tear Dog 1-6, roger, loading up bazooka team now, be on the way in 02, over.
And I explained the situation, tanks all over the place and so on, but we have it, we have it in our hands. So what I did to get better communications, I looked around and found a hole in the roof, and I placed the antenna up and clear the bell. So for this, they're going to give me a Silver Star. I said, that's ridiculous, you know what I mean? But anyway, this is what they want to do. Shortly after that, the war ended, because evidently we met, encircled them, and so they had nothing but to give up, see? But at that point, Lieutenant Boucher had to go to the bathroom. And he said, Joe, keep an eye, I gotta go. It was an empty house, so you went, okay. Who came down the road dressed as, he was a handsome young man, a German soldier, with the best duds, a soldier could have. I don't think he was an officer or, but anyway, I said, oh boy, what do I do in the case? I said, so I had a burp gun. So as soon as he came in front of me, I said, "An the ho," means hands up.
Hands up.
Okay. He was surprised. I was surprised when I seen his holster with the gun open. The holster was open. I figured, if this guy seen me first, he probably would have shot me or anybody else. And I give him a shot of the burp gun on both sides. made him know that I was serious. And I said, put that down, okay? So he took it out of the holster, and I had that right on the So when I shot the burp gun, Lieutenant Boozer come out with his pen. What the hell's going on? I said, you know what? He just asked me in German, but I understood. He said, my girlfriend is only 300 yards or meters down the road. He said, you took my gun, I'm your prisoner. All you have to do is give me a little chance to be with her. He said, shoot the son of a bitch. He said, no. I said, no, I can't do that. He's a handsome dude, he really was. Yeah. Well, to make a long story short, when they took him away after they briefed him, he was in a Model T truck, sitting on the end of 6, I think it was 6, 3 on each side. And I could just visualize him to this very day. He waved until he was out of sight. He knew I saved his life.
Yeah.
He knew that I could have killed him. I didn't, though. We met the Russians on the Elbe River.
The link-up between the Americans and the Russians at the River Elbe near Torgau marked the climax of the two great advances into the heart of Germany from west and east. It was colossal news, announced on the eve of the enemy's total collapse.
You caught up with the Russians at the Elbe.
Yes.
Do you remember, was there any sort of ceremony, any sort of shaking of hands, drinking of vodka?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you know, they had all kinds of money. They had a thing on the truck about this big and that high and about that wide, you know. And, you know, they'd say, hey, and they'd want a watch. You got any watch? You know, and they paid $150, $200 for a Boulevard or Mickey Mouse watch.
Yeah.
They had money to burn, you know. They didn't impress me as soldiers. They were just, you know, fighters, but no, I don't know. I just, like I said, I told them that what we should do is go right through those people because they are just nothing but trouble. Yeah. Yes, we had a jubilation of practically we felt because we met the Germans were defeated, and right then and there we actually were celebrating because the war was over, and to us it was over. I'm really, honestly.
This is the BBC Home Service. We're interrupting programs to make the following announcement. It is understood that in accordance with arrangements between the three great powers, an official announcement will be broadcast by the Prime Minister at 3 o'clock tomorrow. In view of this fact, tomorrow, Tuesday, will be treated as Victory in Europe Day.
I realized the war was over, and you know what happened that day? Culp and Tito were just like that. Mm-hmm. Culp was cleaning his carbine, and he had a couch, okay? And Culp come in and he said, hey, Tito, do you need anything mailed? I'm going to mail some letters. Yeah, he said, just a minute. And he got his heel stuck under the couch, raising his carbine, and he shot him in the head.
Oh, gosh.
That man, Greg, I don't know, he must have gone crazy. Because no matter what we give him, medicines or drink or whatever, he just was out of it. And I'm almost sure that he must be, you know, what do they call it, PTSD, yeah. Well, anyway.
And that happened on VE Day, huh?
Right on May 8th, 3rd, or whatever it was.
Yeah, May 8th, yeah.
It happened right on the day it was over. Major Starling said, Joe, what do you want to do? I said, well, I am proud of the 30th Division. And I said, I would like very much to go and get the 30 days off and then get into the fray. We have a war to fight, you know? So it just so happened that August, the war ended in okay? So in the meantime, the men that were with me in the unit that I was in went home on the Queen Mary. And I went home in a rowboat, a Liberty ship. We went from the 30th to the 106th to the 76th to Camp Lucky Strike, and finally got to the coast, and then we got in a ship and went up. September 27th, I got home. I was lying on a truck floor, and I think Truman, became the president, and that was just before the war ended. We were billeted in plowing because the war was over, and they gave plowing to the Russians, so that was their sector. So they said, "What are you doing here? There's Russians all over the place." Well, I was walking. I stood overnight, and because I had a nice rapport with their family, so this Russian had a braid on both shoulders, and he must have been a high official. But had I saluted him, they would have said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing here? You're an ally, but not friendly." I'll tell you. So I just let him go by, and that was it. So I said, "Well, listen, I just got to go out of town and do this, So there was 3 Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian girls that were probably prisoners, okay, sitting on a pile of potatoes. They picked me up.
Yeah.
I sat down, and they spoke English. And they said, "You know what? There's a roadblock up ahead." I said, "What do we do?" She said, "You know what we got to do? Got to tell the driver to stop before we get there." And they took the potatoes off and covered me with the potatoes.
Wow.
Till we got through the roadblock. Well, I finally got to the captain of my unit. "Where the hell you been, Brunacini?" I said, "I was in plowing." He said, "What? We got tanks poised against each other. It's just a Cold War going on." I said, "Well, I'll tell you the truth. I didn't see it. I didn't know it until, I got back." So, I mean, those are days that I'll probably never forget. You know Tom Cusimano?
Yeah, sure.
Did you know? Okay. He was across the street in Hoff. And I looked at him and I said, "Geez, that looks like Tom Cusimano." And, "Hey, Tom." He turned around. I said, "Oh my God, what a small world." I said, "You're in Hof, Germany." "Yeah," he says, "I've been here, billeted." I said, "Well, I'll be darned." Do you know how to play poker?
I do know how to play poker.
Threes, if you got a 3 showing, you had to pay the size of the pot.
Ah.
If you get a 9, it's, you use anything you want. Well, this guy from South Carolina says, I used to get the 9s, he used to get the 3s. "God damn you, Joe! Why are you getting all the 9s? I'm getting the 3s. I have to pay the size of the pot." And I invariably win. But, I had a lot of fun. I didn't need to. I have a dollar bill that's in my, a chest that they all signed before I left. They left. No, I called from the depot.
Okay.
I said, "Josephine, get your mother and father and whoever wants to come, and my mom, because she was a widow, and meet me at the depot." And so it was a wonderful feeling, really.
Yeah, wow. And depot in Jamestown?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You know something? I just lost my wife on the 3rd of January.
And my condolences.
What a loss, Heavenly Father. We were married 76 and a half years.
Right, golly.
Who the heck lives that long in one lifetime?
How did you meet her?
Well, it was her birthday, and her brother said, Joe, my sister's having a birthday. You want to come? I says, yeah, I'll go for that. Cake and coffee, why not? So she took a liking to me. I didn't know it because she was 15, I was 17. No, I was 20, and she was just a kid, you know. So another time, the Crassies on Hazard had a birthday party, and she went there, and I happened to be invited to it. Well, to make a long story short, she said, you know, could I see you? I said, well, you're a little young, you know. So anyway, I ended up getting married to her. She was 17, and I was 22. I was what they call a cradle robber. Yeah. But we had 13 children, Greg.
13 children.
13 children, yeah. 7 girls and 6 boys. And there they are up there.
My gosh.
Yeah, we lost 5 of them. 3 girls and 2 boys. Joey and Vincent.
Yeah.
You probably knew Vincent too.
Vincent, yeah.
Because he was with Joey,
Right.
you know. You know, Greg, honest, I tell you, I was the proudest man in the Army. I was proud to be in the 30th Division. I'll tell you what, Greg, I can give you about 3 or 4 illustrations that I should have got killed. I'll give you one.
Sure, please.
During the Ardennes, they had artillery barrages, and I brought in some equipment and food, and I was with 2 men. I was in the middle. They were flanked on both sides. And I was walking back to the Jeep when one of the guys called me back. He said, look, Joe, do you know what happens when the artillery comes in, hits a tree? If you're under that tree, you look like a sieve because the artillery breaks up and shrapnel hits down below. And that, in the meantime, the artillery was coming in, and where I would have been, in the middle, between the 2 men, an artillery shell come in.
Oh my gosh.
And one of them was turning gray and died shortly after, but the other one was hurt bad, and I don't know, they had to bring him back to the hospital. So, and I was saved by, I don't know, God has been good to me. There was a truck that had a wheel along the edge of the foxhole, and I opted to have that cover in case of an artillery attack. Well, what happened? A barrage of artillery come in, and it hit the stack of sand which was right next to the truck, but it didn't go off. So had it done that, the truck would have probably wavered and sand, I would have, okay. I remember when we crossed the Rhine River, we jumped in the foxhole at the same time, and this man was a chaplain. And I watched him as we faced each other, crowded as it was, and he winced, and I probably did too, but I wasn't worried about him. I said, how come a man with a cloth like yourself, you're afraid to die? No, he says, I'm made of flesh and blood. I want to live. I said, well, I think we all do. Now there was another incident that Lieutenant, let's see, there was 3 or 4 of them. Joe, he said, go I'm putting you in charge. You go to this place. They're gonna have a scouting, you know, and this Rafferty was on the. He says, this man has, you know, he did it twice that I remember. He says, this man's wife has a child. Let him, you know, get someone else. So there were two Duffys, John Joseph and John Francis Duffy. So what happened, John Francis said, don't worry, Joe, I'll go in your place. You know, you went last time, you know, he didn't know that. The major didn't know that. Okay. So I was willing to go, but he said, I'll take. So he was in the Jeep waiting for him to come out. In the meantime, artillery hit a chimney and glanced off and got him in the Jeep.
Oh, gosh.
Had I been sitting there waiting for it, I would have. So you see, there was, and then another time I remember when I dropped my helmet and I went forward to pick it up, and the artillery shell come in and just shook me up, you know, but it didn't hurt me. I mean, there was so many instances that the good Lord saved me for something, Greg, I don't know what. I'll tell you what I have here. I'll tell you, I put this distinctly. This woman here next door is a saint. And I read this and I says, I'm going to read this to her. I thank you, dearest friend of mine, for all the love you've shown, for helplessness and tender thoughts or helpfulness, the laughter we have known, the outstretched hand that always there through days of strain and stress. No matter what I say to or do, you never loved me less. I thank you for so many things, the pure delight we share, the many times you'd stop to chat, and just because you care, the words of praise that mean so much, the hopes and smiles you lend, because you always take the time to love me as a friend. For every yesterday so sweet, tomorrow yet to be, the moments rich in precious dreams that mean the world to me. For being you and loving me each day that God shall send, my heart knows peace because of you. I thank you, dearest friend.
Wow.
Isn't beautiful?
That is gorgeous.
And then over here I have this other note about my home.
Yeah.
Okay? It says, my home is like a citadel where malice cannot enter, a fortress built on love and trust where God is in the center. My fortress is not built of stone. It is void of worldly things, but is such intolerance that exceeds the wealth of kings. Kindness fills the atmosphere. Patience engulfs the halls. In smiling faces evidence God dwells within these walls. There is no space for anger here, no place for gloom and doom, for faith hath prevailed, and it reflects God's love in every room. My home endures despite the wrath that life sometimes can dole, because it's held together with the strength of God's control.
Beautiful.
Isn't it beautiful?
Beautiful.
And this is, I think God has some reason for me to live through the 99 years. I don't know. Everybody has that faith that I'm going to be at least 100.
Well, you're clicking, man. You are clicking.
I want to be with my wife in heaven because I know she was a saintly woman. She did everything that God wanted her to do.